DCarsonCPA, MFC and the lines. We break out the whiteboards. We're going to share a simple mind map of some area in the economy and financials, an area where we can help, and an area where we'll share some of our insight and reserve some of the insight for the actual points we're meeting services. As we think about this, we're thinking about a town or municipality. So this is a simple local model of governance and financials. Looking at a town or village or a city, this is the lines of local government. And we remember a time that long ago the foundation of the nation was a collection of colonies that were just towns and villages, small groups of people coming together. And if you think about the Northeast or Virginia or different places where you might be with a longer, comparatively longer roots to our nation's history, we're going to have some small towns, rustic towns. Some time ago they were set up with some articles of governance or an incorporation, and that was the local structures, the rules, and the local rules and structures of how they'd set that government up. And it might have been so simple as you had a town leader, town council, and some judicial element of the town there, maybe a town court or whatnot. It's interesting because the nation has grown so much, and there's the question of the local rule. People want to have more local rule. We all function at a more local level immediately, so there's certainly some relevance here, because the greatest point that any one of us can have immediate impact is in our local town, in our city or village or a town, the way it goes. And in towns and villages, certainly your impact can be much bigger, because where there's less people, by fact of numbers, you are a larger impact. So you have a great opportunity to work on town and village lines here. And it's an important thing to share, because DCarsonCPA was a line built in a tough time in the economy. We went with deep lines of global, state, national, and local research, with the idea that a lot of challenges exist for the cross-sector needs of industry, NGOs, nonprofits, government, and individual families as stakeholders, some who had been really hurt in the outfall. And that's an important thing. And so we grew a line that was about trying to help in the economy in as many ways as we can, trying to help for the jobs growth, for the recovery, and for the lines of each generation a little better off in the economy and financials, which I think is a common point where no matter how we specifically think about different lines, we can all agree that's something we'd like to have for ourselves and our families today and tomorrow. As we built the lines, we worked with economic, statistical, legal and rules, research and laws and rules, which is legal research, with financials, our core skills, with technology, because that's where everything's happening today, and with broad lines and societal research to understand a large picture. And we kind of went up and down. We went between the local, the state, the federal, the national lines. It gave us some great cross comparison and cost comparisons to the ways people manage their finances at different level, and ideas about what can be done to help basically government at any level function a little better, and how can it better support its constituents, which should be the end goal, is how do you work with the tools you have to better meet the needs. And when you look to these lines of any community, basically it's set up government. The idea was they set up a structure of government. They have ongoing involvement with initiatives, ballots, and those type of things, delegated authority to elected officials, and some more permanently employed officials perhaps in the town lines, and a continual basis of renewal, where basically there's a transaction, money is given to government. In return for the money, certain societal services are expected, and there's the pathways of how that happens. That may happen on the lines of, there also has to be the line of funding, so that money line is usually about taxation, about real estate taxes, service taxes, and perhaps income taxes, depending upon specific local rules. And then you have elements of health and human services, elements of pensions for people who work in government, elements of the societal lines of governance, codes, and regulations. You've got lines of trades and commerce and governance of business. You've got lines of environmental protection and things of that nature. You may have decisions, protect the lake or whatever you may have in there. There's some different lines of relevant points. And then you've got the lines where basically you've got some financial goals and objectives within a town. You've got the taxation lines, which are the funding lines of any small local town or village. And those funding lines are set up to meet the expenditures, which would be the needs for the appropriations and the ongoing services budgets. And potentially in those service budgets there's a little more, and we'll discuss that in a minute, or we'll discuss it rather right now. What happens is that in the general fiscal policy of a town, you would balance out in the budget, or you might run a surplus, but there could be a point in time where your town has a economically stressed environment, where the community constituents cannot afford high taxes and everyone's under a lot of pressure. You may scale back, and it could be the case that expenditures exceed revenue inflows, which creates a deficit and the need for some public funding, which is the point where municipal bonds are issued and you go out to the marketplace. But that has a cost of borrowing, a cost of interest, which increases the operating cost for a local government. So as we talk about the lines here, we think about different things that could happen in the government lines, and so that's a broader equation where the equation of any local municipality would be tax revenues equals expenditures plus debt service plus interest cost, meaning that if you had to go out at some point in time, you have some carrying cost of debt, and the net balance is the surplus or deficit which needs to be dealt with. Surpluses and deficits could be dealt with cuts in taxes or increases in taxes. Sinking funds may be set up for future capital projects, and another reason you might raise bonds for a town is you're trying to do some capital works, like some waterworks or something that's very expensive, build a dam, those type of things. We think back to the lines, there's a couple other points we want to discuss real quick as it's getting a little dark in some of this video. That the industry lines, local government has the ability to work with industry, and they can work in favorable or unfavorable ways because the town itself may decide we don't want business in here or we want a low grade of commerce traffic, so they may pass some rules in the government up here to say let's not have commercial roads, or let's highly tax or prohibit commercial parking, let's zone our commercial areas, and that type of restrictive activity either limits or facilitates business. So you'll see a business favorable, business neutral, or business unfavorable environment in a town or municipality, and that's one line of financial engineering that can help in the revenue base, because if you have some business taxes in town, like a business filing or something like that, that's also a revenue generator back here. You've got the lines of NGOs, but NGOs are broad global research lines, and they do have excellent centers that deal with town and municipalities and the type of problems, so there is some knowledge capital in NGOs to help on these lines, but they're not direct lines, they're indirect, so it takes a bit of economic research and some of those skills which we do have, the economic and legal cross skills. Then next to the nonprofit lines, a nonprofit in your community might be dealing with sports, history, education, whatever it is. There will be some nonprofits in your community. They support societal needs, but perhaps not direct needs that we decided were worthy to be funded this way. And sometimes you have like a nonprofit ambulance company and different things. You may also have shared services where you have a town that's so small it doesn't have its own high school, so you have a regional high school. I think some towns in New Hampshire do stuff like that, and different places around have things like that. I'm just using New Hampshire because it's a nice day to think about New Hampshire, and my grandmother used to live there long ago. Right now, as we look at the economy and financials, we think about things. The NetNet Line is we're here to help on the village and municipality lines, and this is a sketch map to some of the key points. It's our first time doing a video on the village and municipality lines, so we'll come back with some better stuff soon, but this is just a maiden one to break the ice and say we're here to help on village and municipal lines. We've got lots of thoughts and ideas about how to help here, and these are some of the broad lines of the thoughts that just come to the top of our mind. I'm Dean Carson. DCarsonCPA is your mark and brand for economic applied research and for the financials. We can help on different needs where you are today, and we map in technology